Well, hello, everybody. See some people already there. You guys crack me up. Welcome to The Reason We Learn, impromptu live. I've decided to do because today was the day in my home state of North Carolina that our Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, dropped, as they say in the journalism world, the report about indoctrination in our state schools. And even though it's North Carolina specific, I want to bring it to you because I think you should see an example of what's going on in one state. And remember, this was like 500 submissions of people who actually came forward and submitted things. It's not everyone in the whole state, not every classroom, not every school, not every district. So imagine how many people didn't submit things. Just think about that as we go through this. Now, I only have the summary of the report, but in itself, it's 43 pages long. We're not going to go through like every single page. I'm going to like show you some highlights. The original report, the full report was up until, I don't know, less than an hour ago. And then it got taken down because technical difficulties. It was weird. They said the size of the report, we're having problems, whatever. But I quickly downloaded the summary. So now I have it locally and we can go over it. As I said, it's 43 pages. So there's a lot to go through. We're not going to go through all. Don't worry. I figure this will be, maybe we'll talk about it for an hour or so. But the other reason I wanted you to see is this was a task force set up by the lieutenant governor in North Carolina, the lieutenant governor in the legislature. And they have a fair amount of oversight over our education here, our board, our state board. Also, the state superintendent was part of this. I should say state superintendent. She's the head of the Department of Public Instruction is how we call it here. Every state's a little different. But what I'm thinking is, if you're out there in another state and you're wondering why you don't have one of these, well, then go ask your legislature, or go ask the people in charge of your state board if there's anybody looking at putting together a task force to find out what's going on in the schools. In some states, they're just going to laugh at you and ignore you. But if you live in, I'm in North Carolina, if you live in a state that, maybe has some sane people in the government, you might be able to get something like this done. So welcome to everybody who wanted to join me for this. I appreciate the company because I just gave it a cursory glance, but I haven't gone through it. And I have a feeling it's going to make me a little sick. So I get to do that live. It's kind of fun. For those of you who are, somewhat new here, I wanted to also ask you to please consider subscribing to the channel and supporting my work by joining my locals community. If you're interested in this sort of thing, whether you're in North Carolina or not, interested in homeschooling, interested in learning how to deal with your school board or just your Department of Education, join my locals at thereasonwelearn.locals.com. And it looks like that. And we have 2 Zoom calls a week and we talk about all these things. All right, let's get into this. Let's get into what you came for. All right, I'm going to load it up. The Office of the Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, Indoctrination in North Carolina Public Education. This is a summary of the report. So let's give it a look. Okay. So first, this talks about the 500 submissions. And these submissions were a detailed report of concerns from parents, students, teachers, and administrators. As a task force, we reviewed individual submissions with the staff of the Lieutenant Governor and gave our thoughts on what we saw within those submissions. From that, the office began to compile a report. This report provides insight into the vast number of issues facing public education. Now, this is really important. This report was not designed to give specific action recommendations or anything like that. This was just an information gathering exercise. They wanted to see, was there indoctrination going on in North Carolina schools? And from what little bit I watched, a video taken by a friend of mine here locally who attended, the conclusion was yes. Overwhelmingly, yes. It's not up for discussion. Indoctrination is going on in North Carolina schools. So in my opinion, you can extrapolate from that and assume that this is going on in probably every state schools. But here's North Carolina. So there's no recommendations. It's just a summary. They have an introduction, methodology, statistics, findings. What I wanted to go over is some of the findings, but I think it is important to talk about what this task force was. If you want to set one up in your own state, you might as well know what they did. It's called F.A.C.T.S, which stands for Fairness and Accountability in the Classroom for Teachers and Students. Kind of cool acronym, right? F.A.C.T.S. Fairness, and I like the A, accountability. We don't have that. So this was created in response to reports received by the Office of the Lieutenant Governor regarding alleged cases of indoctrination in North Carolina public schools. The F.A.C.T.S task force aims to provide support to parents, teachers, and most importantly, students. Remember students? Remember them? And let's see, in North Carolina, by creating an infrastructure by which individuals can report perceived instances of indoctrination that they see or experience within the state education system. Now, let's talk about the word perceived. On this channel, I talk a lot about perception doesn't mean it's reality and so forth. So they use the word perceived, but there are examples of pieces of curriculum in here. There are examples from lesson plans. So you be the judge if their perceptions are reality. I think they're pretty accurate. And I think it's kind of interesting that feedback is already coming in from the News and Observer and some of the reporters there, one in particular, that this is just not true. And, it's crazy. It's not really happening. It's just perceptions, which I find doubly ironic because remember, the people who support critical race theory and say it's just a theory or they say that it should be done, talk a lot about lived experience. And, the impact is what matters, not what your intention was. So these people, these parents, these teachers, these administrators are saying, here's my lived experience in the school, my students' lived experience, my lived experience as a teacher. Here's my literal, the lesson plan I was trying to deal with, and I didn't want to deal with it. And the impact was I was stressed out. I was upset. I was afraid I'd lose my job. And yet there are already people saying, well, that's they're denying it still, even with all this. Now, I do think this one particular reporter didn't read it because there's no way you could have read. First of all, it's really long. I doubt in the span of time from the press conference to his comments on Twitter that he could have read it or even glanced at it very well. But to come out of the gate saying, no, it's not true is pretty remarkable. So these are the members of the task force. It was a group of volunteer education professionals. They're not paid. They have no, nothing financial to gain. Volunteer education professionals who have relevant experience in different roles involved in education. These professional educators include teachers, administrators, university professors, education policy experts, and elected members of the North Carolina House and North Carolina Senate. And then this is the list of the people below. The purpose of the report is to provide a clear picture of the current state of North Carolina public education as it relates to indoctrination of students according to partisan political ideologies. This report seeks to compile information from multiple sources. Submissions that were received through F.A.C.T.S, through F.A.C.T.S submission portal housed on the website of the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. So people could anonymously submit things, right? Follow-up emails from those that submitted complaints who provided additional information, including documents, screenshots, pictures, email threads, PowerPoints, and other materials relevant to their submission. So people didn't just go, I think this. They were handing materials like evidence. Remember evidence? I know. It's this quaint little thing we used to use. Documents released by public schools and by county boards of education. So even the schools themselves were, providing things. Articles and relevant social media from those involved in public education in North Carolina. Be careful what you put on Twitter because it stays there. I mean, people were hashtagging, you guys. There are some tweets in here. Hashtag 1619. Hashtag CRT, critical race theory. I mean, but no, there's nothing going on. Methodology. This report was prepared by the Office of Lieutenant Governor Robinson using the sources and data previously referenced. Thank you, Shane. Oh, what do you have to say? Feedback. We live in Huntersville, North Carolina, just within Mecklenburg County. I watched your previous video on Independence Thanksgiving to be covered in MEC schools. You have me on high alert. Good. Stay on high alert. You should be. Thank you so much for your super chat, but I'm here for you. This was of particular relevance to you then. So the submissions were taken in on the website, and they were then deemed relevant to the efforts of the task force. The submitter was contacted if they provided contact information and asked to further explain the submissions. They didn't just take things and take it on faith. They contacted all these people. This was labor intensive, you guys. And they said, do you have any other evidence to show for that? So anybody saying, well, this is just their opinion, most people who contacted had something to show. They had something of substance. Or they could back it up. They could corroborate it. Other people telling the same stories. Supporting documents and materials were compiled, and any follow-up communication was sent to the submitter if necessary to explain any of the supplemental materials provided. Selected pertinent submissions were reviewed by and with the volunteer education professionals comprising the task force for their analysis and commentary with regard to whether the information or occurrences contained within these submissions, if true, were in addition to submissions that were appropriate for inclusion in curricula or presentation in a classroom. So something you submit, you might say, this is what we had, and I'm really upset about it. But then they would still run it by education professionals. Is this appropriate to be in the classroom? So they got another opinion. So, this was pretty intense. And I just want everyone in North Carolina to see this, to understand. If you read in the paper tomorrow or you see on the news that there are people saying, well, this is, Mark Robinson is a Republican and blah, 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 Berger's a Republican. This is not partisan. This effort was done with lots of people who had got their say in. And so when they came to the conclusion that there was indoctrination, it passed muster with a lot of people. So let's see, let's continue. So they were looking to see if it was appropriate for education. Now, here we have the statistics, the breakdown of submissions by county. This is just who submitted. This does not mean that if you don't see your county there or they're pulled out specifically, that this stuff isn't happening in your county. Likewise, it doesn't mean that these are, that all the submissions that could have come in came in. 500, like I said at the outset. What if there were people who didn't submit? This is just what they got. So the largest segment here are other counties. So it's kind of like all these other counties that are not specifically mentioned, compiled in one, is 36.4%. Look at Wake County. Look at the gray. 20.9% of the submissions came from Wake County. That's where our capital is located, okay? And then you have Orange, North Carolina is the 12%. Mecklenburg County is the green. 6.8% of submissions came from there. And remember, if you see a smaller number, like from Meck County, being from Meck County, I can kind of analyze this a little bit. I don't think that's necessarily reflective of what's going on. Oh, look, it's so much less than Wake County. I think it reflects more that fewer people either felt comfortable submitting because the dominant ideology in Meck County is consistent with these submissions, or they agree with what's going on. That's what I think. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, I cannot prove it. It's an opinion. But based on what I saw when my kids were in the school, and we're talking like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, still, so I'm sure it's worse now. I think that 8.8% doesn't tell the whole story. Okay. I think that Wake County is a little bit more diverse in terms of the political leanings, ironically, than Meck. Meck County is very left leaning. Okay. With the possible exception of little tiny bits of Huntersville and little tiny bits of Davidson. Okay. And then you have Guilford, Durham, you see these other counties. It shows you where the submissions came from. The geographic breakdown of this FACTS investigation depicts reports of indoctrination in every region of North Carolina. So no region went without reports. They just had differing numbers of submissions. As shown above, there's no specific statistical pattern of indoctrination across the state between metropolitan and rural areas. So if you're in a rural area, and I know some people who are, and they moved there specifically thinking, I'll be safe here. I'm in a rural county. It'll be fine. Maybe not so much. Okay. Although there seems to be a concentration more of the urban areas, which you would expect, right? But it doesn't mean that the rural areas are free and clear. It just means there are fewer submissions. Okay, so they received and processed over 500. of these submissions from every region. So these are the things they found. These are the themes that came through. Fear of retaliation. I don't know if these are in any kind of order or hierarchy, but it's listed number one. So the sexualization of kids, critical race theory, CRT, white shaming, biased news media and or lesson plans. In Mecklenburg, they use CNN in the classroom. I mean, hello. Shaming of certain political beliefs. Remember the crying room they had at my kids' lab school in Charlotte for, the crying area for somebody to go in and cry after Trump got elected? Yeah. Slightly biased. So this report describes each of these themes and provides examples from the submissions that were received. Excerpts from submissions are given as well as a reference to the submission number from which they originated. So we're going to go through these. And like I said, I can't go through all the submissions, but I'll just sort of pick a couple from each one so you can get the flavor of what they were. So let's talk about the first one, fear of retaliation. Now, I personally know teachers in other states who will tell me this is the case. They see the stuff going on in their school and they're terrified to talk about it because they're afraid they'll lose their job. So here it says, teachers, parents, and students across the state are afraid to report indoctrination or speak up in their communities out of fear they will lose their jobs or face mistreatment when pushing back against indoctrination, bias, or a lack of freedom of inquiry and freedom of speech in the classroom. And when it says afraid they'll lose their job, they're not just talking teachers are afraid they're going to lose their teaching job. I had a parent tell me, and again, this is about 3 years ago now, they did not want to come with me to a board meeting of a local public charter school with the chairman of the board and the director of the school to discuss issues about indoctrination and so forth, because they were afraid of losing their job in the private sector. They were afraid it would get back to their job that they participated, never mind what they said, that they came with me to talk about something that had happened and that would make its way back to the boss and they get fired. They didn't want to go and speak up at the school itself about things going on at the school for the same reason. These are parents. Didn't want to do it. They agreed with me, sat on the phone with me one guy sat on the phone with me for an hour. Oh, I barely got a word in. Me, who talks constantly. I was just, yep, I'm with you. Yep, totally agree. Just blah, 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 blah. And I said, so you'll come with me, right? Oh, no. So, he got to vent to me, but then asked me if I would represent his point of view without naming names. Really? I did, but I wasn't a credible representative because they knew how much I was upset about these things. So that's everybody, not just teachers. And of course, students. Imagine if your parent feels that way, how do you think you feel as a student? You're not going to say anything in the class. So here are examples. It says, note in the examples below, 10 are from current or former teachers. Imagine that. You're going into work and you can't say anything about what you're doing. So this first person, now I think this was submitted online, so it's missing a lot of punctuation, but I'm not going to hold that against the teacher because I think that, they're typing into a little box. Okay. I am 5 years away from 20 years, like 5 years away after a 20-year career for retirement. And that seems like forever right now. I will continue to do the best for my students because that is why I became a teacher. But something needs to change. I have too many years in to stop, but I want so much to be done. As a parent and a grandmother, I don't want my family attending public school now. And that is really saying something because my mother was a teacher and my sister is a teacher in public school. I don't trust the values being taught, all because of the political views. It was fine in our country to talk about Biden, but not for anyone else. I never talk politics anyway, but it was very evident who was allowed to speak and who was silenced. I pray you can do something to fix what is going on so I can continue to believe in what I do. Please keep my letter private because I don't want to lose my job so I can still get my retirement. 20 years of loyal service, and this person is afraid. There's a teacher association in our state. They don't have collective bargaining, but it's still basically a union. And she's still afraid that she won't get backed up if she says anything about the bias going on in the classroom. How messed up is that? I couldn't just sit back and act like what was happening is okay. So that's one person. Here's another one. Dear Lieutenant Governor Robinson, I'm a North Carolina public school teacher. I'm politically conservative, and I want to thank you for addressing the issues of leftist indoctrination in the public schools. Now, journalists are well, of course, this person's conservative, so whatever. Isn't that interesting? What if the shoe were in the other foot? Should you just be discounted because you have different political views? Should your criticisms go, we don't count that because you're not neutral? No. if they're not supposed to be sharing their views in the classroom, okay? And so the person who's most likely going to hear it is somebody who has a different view. They're not in agreement already. You don't discount that out of hand. It says, while there are many dedicated teachers who are committed to providing high quality, bias free education in children, the leftist political activism in our school system is real. Many of us are too afraid to lose our careers and reputations to speak out against it. Public education has become a liberal-minded dumping ground versus an educational institution that will prepare students with the necessary skills to attend college or enter the workforce. Anyone who speaks up is afraid they'll be canceled or terminated because they have a different opinion. And now we come to a parent. As a parent, this makes me upset. As an educator, this is infuriating. So she's both. I shouldn't say that. I'm just assuming, look, I'm already biased in assuming it's a woman because most teachers are female. I would also like my name not to be shared as I have 9 years left in education. I would also love to find a way to support your efforts to work with you, et cetera. Okay. So more fear of retaliation. School counselor to middle school, please keep it confidential. Very concerned about the security of my job. Retired teacher and contacted a teacher in Johnson County with this email after getting her approval. I spoke to her today and she agrees that critical race theory is racism. However, she feels threatened, as do other teachers, if they speak out on any format. They are being silenced. She's afraid to even send out this email or any communications with teachers or parents. I don't want anyone to know that I reached out to you. My son learned quickly it was safest not to participate in class discussions rather than risk getting demeaned by the teacher. My son is being put through a learning unit and is activism with videos on how to become an activist, with discussions on topics of climate change, gun control, racial discrimination, and gender equality. Go back to my own experience. My daughter attended Randolph Middle School. It is in Charlotte, Mecklenburg schools. They had a walkout for gun violence, to protest gun violence after the Parkland shooting. The policy on walking out of the school for protest used to be that you could not disrupt learning. So in other words, the students were entitled to their freedom of speech, but it had to be independent of the school and the administration. They couldn't disrupt learning. So in other words, if you left in the middle of class or during class time, you were going to get marked, absent, but you could do it. You wouldn't get like punished or suspended. It's just that you'd be marked, not in class, and you couldn't do it inside the school or you disrupt other people's learning. And there are all kinds of rules that used to be. And that's consistent with the Supreme Court ruling that said, they have freedom of speech to protest, but it just can't disrupt the learning experience. Well, the administrators of all the schools got wind of the fact that this was such an organized protest. It was going to happen at all the schools. And then the superintendent, who was new at the time, he was replacing the outgoing superintendent, so he was sort of provisional, said, we're just going to allow it to happen en masse, and we're going to organize it so it can be safe and efficient and all this. And, I was pretty upset about it. And I contacted him and I said, how can you do this? You're literally stopping the school day and interfering with their learning to facilitate a political protest. How can you do this? Well, they're all going to do it anyway. And we just want it to be safe and orderly. And we don't want there to be any kind of problems and all these reasons. And I'm still not getting the answer. That's not an answer. You are using public resources, including the resource officers, to facilitate a political statement. And not just a political statement for the students, but there were teachers with signs. So I got pretty upset, and I talked to my daughter in the run up to this. There were posters inside the school for the protests. I said, well, all right, freedom of speech. They're allowed to do it. You make some posters. So we went to, and I cleared it with the principal. Can she put up posters? It's only fair. You've got political posters inside, the school. Sure, that'd be fine. So I go and I spend money at Kinko's and we make these posters, and they weren't even political. It was just like the print up of the Second Amendment. There was another print up about, the time it takes for the police to arrive at your home. These were facts, data, no political slogans. And she arrives at the school all proud of herself. She's going to put up the posters. And that same day they decided, no more posters in the school. And they took down all the posters so her posters couldn't go up. So I arrived when the thing was supposed to start, the protest was going to start. And I found the principal and I just told him what I thought about it. And he said, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but we're doing this anyway. I stood and I witnessed the entire thing. The teachers led the kids like it was like a fire drill, including the kids in special ed, like cystic fibrosis kids, not cystic fibrosis, cerebral palsy kids, out in their wheelchairs. They were like pushing them out into the protest. Really, that was They cleared that with everybody. So we're going to take all the students out of the building and facilitate the protest. Then you know what I saw? I would say about 90% of the kids were just having a party. They were outside on the track field, just, milling around, sitting down, talking to each other, playing on their phones. And the rest were standing up in front of the fence with their posters, and the teachers had posters, and they were, signaling and all kinds of different protest things. And this went on for, it took them 15 minutes to get out of the building, to get everybody out of the building. Then they let everybody back into the building. They missed an entire class period. The superintendent had told me, it's just going to be like a 10-minute thing. They're going to walk out and walk back in, but we're going to facilitate it happening. No, it was an entire class period. My daughter was one of maybe half a dozen kids who sat it out, who stayed inside the building. She said, I'm going to class. And she went into the class, and her teacher actually was there, but they didn't have class, because if they'd had class, everybody would have missed it. So it disrupted the learning day. She missed a classroom time of meeting, as did everybody else. And so I was just kind of flabbergasted when people were trying to tell me, like, oh no, there's no political activism going on in school. What are you talking about? Happened again. Another walkout happened at the lab school. Same thing. And that's a charter school. So if you're thinking, well, charter school is going to be better. No, if it's happening in your state and you don't know for sure that they are saying we are not doing this, count on it. It's probably happening. So anyway, this is going on. Here's another. My daughter chose to say mute the majority of the year. That was all three of my kids. Those that agree with the teacher's point of view got positive attention. And those that did not, such as our daughter, who had the courage to join a conversation one day, were told in chat to back down, calm yourself. Some are going to try to make it hard on the majority of us who want equality for all. I want my child to learn others' opinion. Most of all, I want her to form her own views, even if they differ from mine or someone else's. She did not feel comfortable to join in most conversations before or after. This is in virtual learning. I've seen it in the classroom, like physical intimidation. I've yet to say anything to the teacher or the head of virtual academy, simply because there's a possibility my daughter will suffer backlash. And as I've told on this channel before, my middle daughter did suffer backlash. My daughters quickly learned to just write papers from the teacher's point of view to get an A. And that's exactly what they got. They wrote countless papers supporting BLM movement, although they didn't support it as they are not racist nor were raised to be. So she doesn't actually support BLM, but wrote a paper supporting BLM and got an A. They should have been learning, with so much focus on racism, they just played a game. Oh, this was like in math. Well, they should have been learning math, science, history. They were learning how to play the game to get a good grade. I'm being targeted and pressured to leave the school through bad evaluation marks. This is a teacher, and so on. So you get the drift. They're afraid of the backlash. This one, guys, get ready. All right. Get ready for this. The sexualization of kids. There have been numerous reports of the sexualization of kids across the state. This may involve coercing students into affirming ideas about sex and gender that their parents do not wish for them to be taught about. In some instances, school administration instructed educators to lie to parents about their children and to keep issues regarding their child's sexual identity and preference hidden from the parents. Here's a book. This book was used in North Carolina classrooms, I believe in the 4th grade, I think. This illustrates a biological boy. So the boy is in 4th grade in the book, who wants to be a girl. The boy wants to be a girl. The book talks about cutting off male genitalia and hormone therapy. The submitter who shared this information said the book was included in their child's elementary school. The book is recommended for 3rd to 7th grade students. Here's an excerpt from the book. So, do you want to? He made a gesture with 2 fingers like a pair of scissors. Go all the way? George squeezed her legs together. Maybe someday, she said. Let that sink in. Let that just sink in for a moment. 3rd grade. Imagine reading that book. Imagine your parents not knowing you're reading that book. I'm a school counselor at a middle school, so please keep this as confidential as possible. I am very concerned about the security of my job. Today in a student services meeting, we were given a document titled Orange County Schools Gender Support Plan. The plan is 5 pages long, and as a school counselor, if a student wishes to transition their gender, I have to fill out this plan. Moreover, I am not required to notify the parents. This plan details what bathroom they are to use, which teachers can know, identifies their preferred name and pronoun. I'm also responsible for changing their preferred name and pronoun in Power School. It was stressed that I do not have to talk to the parents about these changes or plans. It's encouraged, but we should call the director of student services for more guidance before we contact parents. This all follows a gender support protocol passed by our school board in December that I was not aware of. So this is something that school boards do have a say in. When you have policies and procedures and protocols like this, school board is involved. Okay. So they don't choose the curriculum. Like they probably didn't choose that book. That was probably chosen by a teaching team or whatever. But then if there's a protocol that has to be put in place for the building about bathrooms and about speaking to parents, and because of course they're going to deal with if there are lawsuits and so forth, they're going to deal with having to hire the lawyers and so forth. They will pass the plan on what are we going to do about notifying parents? What are you going to do about who uses what bathroom or whether you change it in Power School? That your school board can deal with. So if you're trying to figure out who does what, that can be under their purview. So that's something that this counselor had to deal with, and they felt pressured to deal with it. Let's see, here's another one. There's a Teaching Tolerance magazine in my elementary school distributed to teachers who are creating lessons from this magazine. The most recent issue headline included white supremacy in education on the front cover, and on the back cover, the headline read, Queer America. There would be no American history if it were not for the LGBTQ. I discussed this with my principal, who said that it was not part of our curriculum. However, on the heels of this discussion, she continued to elaborate that there was now a 10-year-old girl who prefers to be a boy now, and we are supposed to call her he and him and a new first name, and we are not allowed to tell her grandparents with who she lives with. I'm a school nurse and appalled. I discussed that it's a normal development for girls to like girls and boys to like boys until their hormones kick into place for adolescence, and to reinforce this decision by a 10-year-old is alarming and extremely disturbing that we are now not to inform her guardians of this choice. 10 years old. Don't inform the guardians. In 2012, my youngest daughter was in 5th grade at a charter school in Durham. One of her male teachers told the classroom about students having 2 daddies and 2 mommies and how that was okay. This was around the same time North Carolina was voting on allowing gay marriage to be legal. The teacher made it known he was voting for Obama. Political opinions of teachers and administration should not be allowed in the classroom at all, much less when children are 10 years old. So we can debate whether, it's appropriate to talk in 5th grade about people having 2 mommies and 2 daddies. It all depends on the context. If there are students who have that situation and it comes up, then clearly you would want the teacher to reinforce that we're not mean to people on the basis of things that they don't have any say in, and it's really none of our business and those kinds of things. And you move on to the next topic. You don't want to have people be bullied for that, of course. But if it's antagonistic, or this is the way it is and this is perfectly fine and I'm voting for this person because, which, I don't know, I wasn't there, but let's say we can extrapolate to assume that this kind of thing probably does occur, where it's presented in an in-your-face, even though your parents don't like it, I'm voting for this kind of thing. That's not okay. That's just not okay. They're little kids. They don't control how their parents vote. All right. Nor should you ask them to try. Now we're coming to critical race theory, one of the other themes. A website, Learning for Justice Club, provides North Carolina teachers with over 6,000, that's 3 zeros, CRT resources, which find their way into the school system, but are not state-supported or state-approved resources. So again, as I've said on this channel, you can go to the school board or you can complain to your politicians about CRT in the classroom, but it is possible they're telling you the truth, that they have no idea what you're talking about. Not that if they tell you you don't know what you're talking about, what CRT is, that's not right. But if they say they don't know what you mean about CRT being in the classroom, they may be technically telling the truth because it's coming in with the teachers. Okay, that these resources are being provided directly to teachers, like doing an end run on the state board or doing an end run on the school board, and certainly the parents. So, teachers have wide latitude to choose the specific lesson plans, the specific books, the specific materials. All they have to be able to do, and this is only if somebody's going to check on them, is explain how this supports the state standards. The states have standards to meet in terms of what subjects you'll teach. And there are rubrics in terms of what specific things the kid will know how to do when they're done. And under Common Core, which is kind of what defined what most of the standards are, even if the state doesn't use Common Core standards, they get used. Teachers use them. That's kind of what still, is used unofficially, even if you're not officially using it. And all that does is say, student will know how to write a paragraph, or student will know how to read a chapter book, or student will be able to talk about American history, or whatever. Okay. They then can go choose materials from 6,000, different things if they want, and teach it the way they want. As I mentioned in another, I think it was in something I wrote in my locals community, there are stories, not in North Carolina, but there are stories elsewhere of teachers using Animal Farm to teach socialism, about workers' rights and fair wages, when I think most of us know that's not what it was about, right? So if you could do that, imagine what they could do with the Constitution and the Declaration if they wanted to teach it as, this is a very racist document, y'all. They'll say, well, the kids read the Declaration of Independence. And you think, isn't that wonderful? But you don't know what was said about it. Okay. So they have wide latitude in terms of what they're going to say about it. So they have all of these resources and they're being pulled into the classroom. It says, in American society, proponents of critical race theory tend to assert that American society, including the government and institutions, exist to advantage white people and disadvantage people of color. That's like literally the purpose of our institutions right now. That's what they assert. Proponents often view society as two distinct groups, the oppressed and the oppressors. Okay. So then here are just some examples. This is a really long one. I'm going to try to go to some shorter ones. Here's one from CMS, my district. I'm ready to report that CMS has all high school students participating in social justice lessons on Thursdays in the advisory period, which is homeroom. The lessons are prepared by CMS staff and have included lessons on white privilege, racism, BLM, LGBTQ+, and many more that fit the liberal agenda. I don't like calling it liberal anymore, it's leftist. When a staff person has complained that they are uncomfortable teaching these topics, we are told that they will help us prepare and be more comfortable, but we must deliver the lessons. You must deliver the lessons. Even though we teach math, for example. So they're teaching math. I'm a math teacher. You must deliver the lesson. Staff at my school specifically have had to attend several PDs, I think it's professional development, on white privilege and racism, about them. On top of that, all of the lessons for homeroom for Black History Month and Women's History Month have all included people who are Democrats and no conservatives. I think what this teacher is probably talking about is all the examples from Black history are people who are activists for one political persuasion. So they probably didn't talk about Frederick Douglass. They probably didn't talk about even Martin Luther King all that much, because remember, colorblindness is bad. So we have to cherry pick what Martin said. So, if you're going to go back and pick like Angela Davis and people like that, you're going to have some bias. Why could we not celebrate the first lieutenant governor who was African-American? Yeah, it's a good question. That says, my name is blank, and I'm in my 14th year of teaching high school. It says, faculty and staff are required to attend professional development related to equity and microaggressions as it relates to race, gender, and other areas. They define microaggression as the everyday slights, indignities, put downs, and insults that people of color, women, LGBT populations, or those who are marginalized experience in their day-to-day interactions with people. As staff, we are being told we are unintentionally racist based on the color of our skin. White, because we have racial bias we are unaware of. We're given examples of microaggressions, such as a statement, I believe everyone can succeed in today's society if they work hard, and the most qualified people should get the job. That's a microaggression. I believe everyone can succeed if they work hard is a microaggression. These presentations are making their way into the classroom as faculty and staff are promoting their own political beliefs and opinions onto their students. Let's see, here's one, Mount Holly Middle School. Okay, in December 2019 and the months leading up to that time, I became aware of a situation involving the teacher in my son's 7th grade social studies class at Mount Holly Middle School. After speaking with my son, after he became visibly upset, I learned that his teacher was promoting anti-religious, anti-law enforcement, sexual orientation, and anti-American assignments in commentary in the classroom. After reviewing assignment boards and actual assignments, which revealed that what my son said to be true, I contacted the teacher and met with her to determine if my son could be transferred to another class. After this meeting, a meeting was scheduled with the school principal, and again, I asked for my son to be removed from this class. Again, my request was denied, and with no success in dealing with the school's principal, I contacted several school board members in the superintendent's office. I also notified the school that my son would not be back in this particular class, and for a week in December of 2019, I picked him up every day at 11:30 a.m., after which a meeting was finally set up with the director of secondary education in the principal's office of the middle school. During this meeting, I presented the facts that I had gathered concerning the teacher and assignments, along with disturbing social media posts she had posted concerning race and law enforcement, which was a violation of the school board's social media policy, and was told those issues with the teacher were a personnel issue and would be dealt with internally. When I asked about the assignments she was issuing as part of her class, I was told it was part of a state-mandated social injustice curriculum. There is no such thing. And so I asked for a copy of that curriculum. I was told it could be found in the state education department website, but no link existed. As a parent and law enforcement officer of over 25 years, it appalls and sickens me that a public school classroom of 7th grade students would be subject to such nonsense, as they are a captive audience, and the sole purpose for these assignments and activity was indoctrination of young minds, plain and simple. As a child of a law enforcement officer, it placed my son in a detrimental position, and the really sad part is it took me raising hell to get him moved from that toxic environment. Look at all the steps she had to go through. And I can relate. I can absolutely relate. I mean, I had to go to multiple meetings to get my daughter removed from a bullying situation. And then my youngest daughter, in a similar situation, I had to go walk in and ask for a meeting, and I was going to be denied the meeting. And so I said, oh, that's okay. No worries. I just wanted to stop by and give you the courtesy of a meeting before I go and report it to law enforcement. I had the meeting immediately because my daughter was getting threatened with bodily harm. But, it took me saying, well, that's okay. I'm just going to go straight to the police department to file a report for them to actually sit down and talk with me. Some would argue that I should have done that anyway. Let's see. But just so you know, that curriculum doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. They said it existed. So if your school says this is mandated by the state, oh, it's part of our curriculum, whatever, follow that up. Check that out, because in all likelihood, it's not true. Unless, of course, you're in California and New York, in which case, yeah, it's probably true. Let's see. My son's 6th grade English class was working on vocabulary today. All of the words my child was learning were critical race theory buzzwords such as bias, discrimination, equity, inequity, racist, etc. The examples for which he had to select the corresponding word were focused entirely on painting white people as the bad people who perpetuate these things. This is not the first incident. It seems to me every time I listened to his English class, this was on virtual, they are covering some topic of social justice ideology with very little learning grammar and composition. I have reached out to the teacher before with my concerns, and the only response I received from her is she's sorry if any of the material made me uncomfortable, but it's the approved curriculum. They're falling back on that, you guys. They're falling back on, it's out of my hands. I have no say. It's the approved curriculum. No, it's not. And to the extent that it's not unapproved, in other words, that they have latitude to do it and feel pressured to do it because their teaching team is doing it. Because in many of these schools, there'll be a group of English teachers or a group of social studies teachers, and they form a team. And the most senior person on the team says, this is what we're doing. Now, if you're new, or conversely, you're old, like you've been there a long time, you're close to retirement, and the person who's been put in charge of the team is making it abundantly clear that this is what you're doing, or that they have the principal's ear, and that there's office politics like any other job, and you don't want to mess up prior to retirement. You may feel like I'm just doing what I'm told because you don't want that to happen. So I don't know which was the case for this teacher. But rest assured, it's probably not state mandated to do this to children at this point. So it's part of how they have plausible deniability in a lot of these states, where they say, we're not doing this. We're not teaching this in the classroom because it's not written down officially that they are. The teachers are bringing it in and modifying its vocabulary. What are you talking about? We had a vocabulary lesson. It was totally, I don't know what you mean, critical race there. We were talking about equity and diversity and all this stuff. Really? I think we know better at this point. This is the mission statement of Hairston Middle School in Greensboro. It's visible on their homepage. Some are more overt. At Hairston Middle School, our mission is to unify families and members of the community to destroy all barriers and systems of oppression by utilizing anti-racist teaching along with cultural responsiveness so that student voice is amplified through international mindedness as we prepare social justice agents of change. Did you think that's what your child went to middle school to become, a social justice agent of change? Do you think that their voice should be amplified through international mindedness? Sounds like a really weird way of saying globalist. Alrighty then. My high school senior is being subjected to indoctrination according to a political agenda or ideology, specifically today in her sociology class. This link is a PowerPoint presentation that we're taught today on inequality of race and ethnicity. And then there's a Google Doc there. By the way, this document is available on the North Carolina. You can look up F.A.C.T.S, F-A.C.T.S, on the Lieutenant Governor's page. So if you want to go look at this yourself, you can, and you can click on anything that would be a link or copy paste it. There was also a slide teaching about colorblind racism, basically why it is actually white privilege. Did you know that? That Martin Luther King's teachings are white privilege? Mm-hmm. I have a photo of that slide, but don't see how to attach it. Some of these are, I think, exhibits at the bottom. So we'll scroll to that and look at that as well. I think I saw that in here. And let's see, on Monday, the 1st of February, the counselor for Tucker Creek Middle School in Havelock, North Carolina, sent an email to all school staff containing links to Black Lives Matter Inc. curriculum as part of Celebrate BLM Week. By the way, in Mecklenburg County, they did have Celebrate BLM. So let's see, resources. I personally called the school, called Craven County Commissioner, the Tucker Creek principal. All three uniformly stated it was an innocent mistake. An email forwarded without full investigation, and the counselor had overstepped her bounds. That is the extent of the action taken. Multiple teachers within the school submitted complaints about the counselor's actions and grievances with the material. So at least some other people stood up in that particular school, but the policing of this is all being done by other teachers, kids, and parents. So my message to you parents is, if you're looking at your curriculum, you're looking at the board and the curriculum choices or the standards, and you're looking and you go, okay, good. I don't see the Kendi book. I don't see white fragility. I don't see anything that jumps out at me. I see equity that makes me a little nervous, but it looks like they just want to make sure kids get, the special needs kids get their needs met. Okay, I think I'm in the clear. Understand that there's no one there who's going down to the classroom to do spot checks or, police it. These are the standards. You got to teach to these standards. Bye-bye. That's it. They're not policing IDEA. They're not policing special needs. Parents have to enforce federal law in public schools. They're having to go and bang on doors and go, my kid's not getting their services. They're not getting what they need for just dyslexia. So now imagine if they have to do that and often bring lawsuits for special needs to be met. What kind of policing you think is going down on the curriculum? Nobody's doing it. There's no one who literally owns that responsibility. It's not the principal's responsibility. It's not the superintendent's responsibility. It's not the school board's responsibility. It's not the head of public instruction's responsibility. In other words, it's not like on Tuesdays, I show up at every single school or whatever, or I check in with everybody, or I do spot checks where I show up, unannounced and look at what they're doing. They don't do that. That doesn't happen. There is no procedure. It is 100% on the teachers, administrators, parents, whatever, anybody who would be concerned to voluntarily do this. Thus the 500 reports. But they had to have the database. They had to have the thing to make their submissions. Prior to the existence of this, prior to Mark Robinson, I know there were people wanting to do this. I know for a fact because I was one of them. This didn't exist. There wasn't somebody collecting this information. Dan Forrest wasn't going, hey guys, tell me how much indoctrination is going on in the school. So kudos to Mark Robinson. Thank you. Thank you. They should every state should have this kind of a thing going on all the time. There needs to be some way to watchdog this. The press isn't going to do it. Nobody's doing it. And when parents try to do it as individuals, we're told we're paranoid, we're crazy, we're loudmouths, we're biased, we're racist, we're whatever we are. Well, here we have 500 reports, and that's certainly not exhaustive. And that was just CRT and the sexualization and the fear of retribution. Now we come to white shaming. Should this even be talked about? Should this even have a place in our schools? Should this be going on at all? Let's just sit with that for a second. That there are any reports of this is too many. Students who are members of racial minorities or other identity groups across the state have been given authority by teachers to shame white students for being racist oppressors. This white shaming instills in children the notion that all white people are racist, that all racial minorities are oppressed. The F.A.C.T.S task force contends that utilizing the classroom as a place to employ race as a metric for determining the moral character of others is discriminatory. And such an activity is not the role or responsibility of the public school system or appropriate for the classroom environment. It's not the role of any classroom. It's not in the United States of America. This is an abomination. If you flip the script, we would know that instantly. But because it's this way, excuses, justifications, rationalizations, etc. This white shaming promotes that an individual should face animosity based solely on actions committed by past members of the race group, which is illegitimate. Below is a slide from the presentation in a high school in Mecklenburg County, my county, that displays colorblind racism, which promotes white shaming. Colorblind racism. Privilege is often invisible to the privileged, and it can blind them to challenges faced by members of non-privileged groups. Groups have privilege. Colorblind racism is a set of beliefs usually held by whites that we live in a society where racial prejudice and discrimination no longer exists. No, that's not what it is. This is what they do. This is another form. This is, first of all, it's a straw man, but it's also gaslighting. Okay? That is not what we think, what anyone thinks. When I say we, I mean like people who have heretofore believed in colorblind, like colorblindness. It's not colorblind racism. We've just said it doesn't matter. Now we've had to change the term to color indifference or color, acceptance or whatever you want to call it. It's just, okay, I see you, but it's not how I determine your value. It has nothing to do with how I decide whether, I want to hire you, be friends with you, have a relationship with you, think you're a good student or anything else. It's just one of those facts about you. Okay. But it's not essential to my understanding of your value on this planet. And they're making it like this weird definition I've never heard before. Have you ever heard that? Oh, all the racism's gone. It's gone. Nobody's racist anymore. Nobody says that. I literally don't know anyone who says that. Least of all, anybody white who says that. Race consciousness, an ideology that acknowledges race as a power social construct that shapes our individual and social experiences. We must recognize the historical record of racism and the social conditions that perpetuate contemporary inequalities. Well, of course, we must recognize historical racism, but they're putting two things together that don't automatically go together. Historical racism is not automatically connected to inequalities today. But you see, that's critical theory. Critical theory says, of course it is, in every single instance. So that's why they make that one sentence. It is not a must that we recognize that connection. It is only a must that we recognize the historical record of racism. Yes, that's a moral imperative. But to say that we must say that they perpetuate inequalities today, no, we don't. That's debatable. My child's freshman history class was told if you're white and Christian, you should be ashamed. I'm a 7th and 8th grade language arts and social studies teacher in Caldwell County. Another program we use supporting the left's narrative is Wit and Wisdom. In my curriculum so far, there was a poem by Tupac, a poem with the line, Southern whites humiliate Southern blacks, and many other such things. Do we need to teach about slavery and segregation? Absolutely. But do we need to make white students feel guilty or shameful about being white while we do it? I mean, obviously you can teach about slavery without making people today feel like it's their personal fault. And just to relate a little story from when I was a kid, and I remember studying the Civil War in 4th grade. I wrote a report about it. I have it somewhere with my little cursive writing because we didn't type it. And I remember learning about the Civil War and learning about slavery and just being appalled. I mean, they taught it in some graphic detail, to be honest. And no one had to say, and because you're white, you should feel ashamed. It was kind of automatic. That I remember the thought process of like, people who look like me did this, and that's, wow. But then the next thought was, I'm really glad I'm from New York, and I was from the North. It's terrible, but I mean, that's kind of how I felt. Was I'm glad there were people who fought it. I'm glad there were people who fought a war to end it. But yeah, the kids automatically go to that place in their mind of like, I look like them, and what does that mean? So for the teacher to even suggest it is just like boom, boom, boom. You're taking something the kid's already questioning. It would be much better to say, people did this and we need to learn about it and we need to have it never happen again. But you who are alive today are not responsible for what they did. You're just responsible for learning about it to make sure it never happens again. That's okay. The reason you learn history is so you don't make the same mistakes twice, but you don't reinforce any kind of guilt that may be bubbling up in them, because it's pretty natural for a kid to wonder about. Let's see. My child says the overall takeaway from the class was right-wing white males are bad. This was not the only class my child has heard this point of view in. As such, we have pulled my high school junior, as well as my other children are now homeschooling and enrolled in private school. So people are like leaving. And you know what's going to happen next? They'll be accused of white flight. So you should be obligated to sit in a public school and listen to what a terrible person you are when you're 10 or whatever. I mean, why? Why should you be obligated to do that? My 8th grade daughter's dance teacher at Holly Grove Middle School has been incorporating lessons on racism into every genre of dance that she's been teaching since the beginning of the semester. If it were a couple of assignments, it would be perfectly fine, but she's spending so much time teaching about racism and dance, she's not able to teach the fundamentals. A recent example of this assignment from May 19th, she had her students view a YouTube entitled Blackface, A Cultural History of Racist Art Form. This is a dance class. And asked the students to explain how blackface is disrespectful and other reflective questions. The video depicts Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, and Judy Garland performing with blackface. These are deceased dance legends who are being depicted in a terrible light, like as if they personally were racist. The one professor in the video says that blackface represents white people who are afraid of black groups and mobs rising up and taking power. He also says at the end of the video that essentially most of us are racist. The statement is an unhealthy and dangerous way to educate our students. Another example from personal experience, when my kid was in a supposed science class in 6th grade, and I've talked about this on Benjamin Boyce's channel, and they were learning about food deserts. They spent a long time, I mean, at least a week. I think it was more like a month on food deserts. And they had to watch a video from YouTube where it was a group, a political activism group, went around taking video of poor neighborhoods and documenting where the nearest grocery store was and so forth, and talking to people about how they had trouble getting their groceries. And it was agenda driven. The whole point of the video was to lobby government to force private companies to open grocery stores. They're showing this to a 6th grade class, 6th grade science class. And, you know, she's like, am I going to learn about plants like ever? Like growing food? That might be relevant. It might have come in handy to know back when we shut everything down and people were wondering where the food went. Target grocery section ended up being like a field trip lesson in supply chain management for us, for my family. Let's see, what do we come to next? Now, biased news media and or lesson plans. Students across the state are being assigned to conduct independent research from biased news outlets and are graded on their evaluation of the media. Many instructors mandate which news outlets that students must view, and in some instances, teachers require the utilization of a single partisan news outlet. By making educators and students use sole media outlet, educators and students can indirectly compel others to agree and or exclude contrary beliefs or opinions from the discussion. Additionally, some educators are implementing lessons that have clear ideological bias, and in some cases are requiring students to affirm these ideologies regardless of what they believe. Isn't that interesting? So we affirm, it's always like affirm the student when the student is saying, I think I might be the other gender. Immediately affirm, immediately change their name, immediately go with whatever the students know best. They know best about these things. Don't tell parents. But if a student wanted to say, I'd like to also look over here at the Federalist or maybe Cato or, some other, even Fox News. And they'd be like, no, you can't do that, but I have an opinion. No, that's not good. You can't have that opinion. Unless it's about your gender, we can have a talk. I mean, really? And here's some more examples. Based on issues with Dr. Seuss books. It has come to our attention that as a country, we've been told we cannot celebrate Dr. Seuss Week as a theme for Read Across America. As an educator in a public K-2 school, it is one of the best weeks out of the year. Students dress up as characters from their favorite Dr. Seuss book or movie. They get to wear their wacky socks for Wacky Wednesday, learn about opposites and rhymes, as well as read and hear many stories written by Dr. Seuss. It is said that because a few parents were complaining, so a few parents said, doctors, we heard from the news, CNN, that Dr. Seuss is racist, and now we don't want Dr. Seuss Week anymore. And so they pretty much shut down Dr. Seuss Week in their school because a couple of parents complained. But if I complain about gun walkouts, nothing we can do. It's just everybody wants it. So everybody wants gun walkouts. We have gun walkouts. Everybody wants Dr. Seuss week. Oh no, you can't have that. A couple of parents complained. We see how it goes. Let's see. Students said she was very nice, but they felt ganged up on as she spoke of racial things and that Black students would get empowered while the white students felt intimidated. Students said if they do not conform to her teachings, they will not pass and were afraid of the kids in class that agreed with her. So this must have been like a guest speaker. Students were asked to play a game where they were put in different rows in the room and asked to try to make a basket, saying that some have it easier than others, and it's not fair to have those in the back have to do the same as those in the front. I don't even understand this game. Use examples of Black versus white, male versus female, concluding that Blacks and females have it harder or less likely to succeed. Really interesting. Okay. Let's see. They had a week in rap that promoted BLM, LGBTQ, the Democratic Party. Son's fifth grade student Chantilly Montessori. That's in Charlotte. It's a magnet school here. Teacher refers to the students as my comrades and my little activists. I've heard her discuss the current political climate often. For example, in discussing the January 6th Capitol incident, she told the students, Trump promoted violence. She's openly supportive of BLM, wearing stickers on her shoes, and the LGBTQ community. She discusses the LGBTQ struggle with the class and has suggested that students can make a difference in the world by helping with this. These are ongoing daily issues. I'd like to know what the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District policy is on discussing the current political climate and a teacher's personal beliefs. This is also, by the way, an elementary school. Let's see. My son is being put through a learning unit on his activism with videos on how to become an activist, with discussions of topics like climate change, gun control, racial discrimination, and gender equality. My son was even asked in a survey about what activist issues are important to him. Oh my gosh. This is current ongoing curriculum in his ELA class. I would also like it known that 3 of my children have had to watch CNN News daily. I told you that. Many times I've asked to correct things, half-truths and outright lies they have watched and believed. So they come home and go, we learned in the news today that this happened. And the parent's like, yeah, no, not really. At the same time, my kids do not know how to sign their name in cursive and have trouble in even the simplest multiplication and division problems. I absolutely know all student abilities vary, but when they're in high school and do not know how to have a legitimate, authentic signature, but can tell me what was shown on CNN, I feel there's a problem. This is now high school, no signature. They can't sign their name. Can't sign their name. Last semester, my daughter is a senior at South Brunswick High School, was asked several times in her English 4 class to report on CNN articles about different political topics such as mask wearing, vaccinations, etc. Only CNN. So, there's no balance at all. It's not that I'm saying, or any of these parents are saying, you may not use CNN. It's just, where's anything to contrast with that? That's not how you teach media literacy. It's to show them one source and say, report on these sources. It would be better to say, go find a source or go find multiple sources, compare and contrast how they're different. Why do you think they're different? That's how you teach critical thinking. You don't teach it by going, go to CNN and report on what they said. Report on the reporters. It's just nuts. Let's see. Okay. My son let me know his teacher from Irving Park Elementary decided to push the BLM movement in class today and compared it to the Civil War. The same teacher also gave an assignment to do a mini biography during Black History Month and decided to only include current liberal figures to report on. There was no option for Martin Luther King Jr. or our own lieutenant governor. Only options for Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, and several athletes. So this goes on. And so let's see if there are any other visible things here. Here's an example. My child came home with a paper and vocabulary words to learn, and one of the words was xenophobic. The teacher had definitions on one side and sentences on the other, and the sentence that described xenophobia was President Trump. Another example was definition of Republican and that Republicans don't care for people's issues, and Democrats are people who care for people. This says, around his birthday, Tony turns into a sleuth in order to find his presents to determine what he's getting for birthday. Okay, that's fine. It says, it can be said that Donald Trump has xenophobia because of his fear of people from other countries. Wow. Okay. Let's see. The teacher made a quiz question, asked what type of voters vote Republican, and the answer was rich white men. That's a quiz in a public school. Never mind that our lieutenant governor is a Republican and he's Black. So, okay then, my child's junior history class was told it's possible for some it's possible that some Republicans could be good people. Might be. I mean, it's a possibility. Okay. Teachers told students about how they participate in BLM marches and students should get involved. Like, join us in our march. And let's see, there's more from Chantilly. Here's one. Let's see, let's keep going. Oh, here are the flying gender unicorn. Yes. So the preceding items were shown at Governor's School and came from a student who attended the program. The flying gender unicorn. Here's helpful pictures of external genitalia for this elementary school. Isn't that nice? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Handouts about white privilege. This is super tiny. I wouldn't expect you to be able to read it. I just want you to know that I'm reading from something real. Of course, Peggy McIntosh. This is, white privilege unpacking the invisible knapsack, and we're giving this to the students. The daily effects of white privilege. This thing was written in the 80s by a rich white lady who is like racist and white supremacist and kind of embarrassed about it. So just like Robin DiAngelo, she's kind of working it out through her little knapsack. None of this is scientific. This is not social science. This is, I was sitting there thinking one day how hard it must be to be Black. I bet Black people don't have these things. Yeah, like that's what racist people do. So they just keep, all the things they're supposed to do to check their privilege. Daily effects of cisgender privilege. Now you have privilege just because you actually agree that you are the gender that you were, quote, assigned at birth. That's a privilege now. Let's see, male privilege. These are all handouts given to students. Look at all this. Look at all this. Do you guys want me to read from any of this? Because it's really detailed and long. I can pull some stuff out, but I don't want to bore you to tears. And but if you put in the comments, you're like, yes, read me a couple, I will. And what is this one? This is Christian privilege checklist. We're starting to get to, guys, as a handout, if they were required to do this, if they were required to answer these questions in any way, and it wasn't just, here, I'm going to hand you something, take it home, throw it in the trash, I don't care, whatever. If they had to check these off and turn it in, if they had to check it off during class, if they had to pick anything to share, this is a violation of their civil rights. Look at Christian privilege checklist. How is this not discrimination? How about the male one? The cisgendered one? If they had to answer any of these, that's compelled speech. That's what Gabrielle Clark's case is about, is things like this and having to check things off because it was an assignment. And he said, no, I'm not doing it, and got in trouble. So if any of your kids are getting these kinds of things at school and they aren't permitted to literally ball it up like this and practice with it for basketball, it's a violation of their civil rights. None of this is part of the approved curriculum. None of this supports the state standards in any way, shape, or form. None of this can be compelled for your student. None of it. So if you find out, and this is for every state, by the way, so like, just so you know, not just North Carolina, if your children are given these checklists and told they have to check them off and turn them in, or have to check them off sitting in the class where students could be like looking at each other or pressuring each other to check things off or announce what they checked or share in any way, this is not okay. And you need to contact somebody like Chris Rufo. You need to contact Parents Defending Ed. You need to contact Counterweight. You need to contact somebody who's going to put you in touch with an attorney, and you need to deal with this. Don't even go straight to the school. Go to legal help, because the school will bury it. The school will say, well, we'll deal with it, and nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. Go second to them. But make sure you know your rights. This is compelled speech. If they have to do anything with it, they have every right to throw it away. Here's one, straight privilege. Now we're asking students. This is a roundabout way to ask students about their sexual preference or sexual orientation. Sorry, not preference. Sexual orientation. Okay? This is insane. Lisa, can you explain what Governor's School is for I see Lisa in my comments. If you can type in what Governor's School is, because I don't want to get it wrong. But this is also based on Peggy McIntosh. And the students, on a daily basis, a straight person, this is so not okay. Minor children should not have to disclose to their teachers without the permission of their parents and the knowledge of their parents Any kind of questionnaire like this has to be sent out in advance. The parents have to approve that their kids can even have it, never mind answer it. Because this kind of thing can be seen as pressure to divulge private, personal information that puts the child at risk. Some of these, I see that you're asking, is this for high school? And I do not know if it was for high school. Let's take a look. Let's go back up here. It's governor's school. Handouts from governor's school. I don't know. I don't know if it is. Let's see if she respond. She didn't respond. But I have seen these in middle schools, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. If they're under 18, they're not legal adults. There is actually the Supreme Court has ruled on this, that these kinds of surveys and questionnaires can constitute grooming to ask a child about their sexual orientation. A teacher, any person in a position of authority over your child should not be asking these questions. Okay? And they just don't have anything to do with the curriculum or the standards. What standard? What academic standard is this supporting? How is this improving their reading, their writing, their math? How is this teaching them social studies, history, civics? It is not. This is junk science. It's not even, I don't want to say science. It's junk, period. It is junk. So it used to be juniors and seniors, and it's just seniors now of high school, governor's school. So it's kind of like one of those, like what high school to college kind of things, I believe. But it's still inappropriate unless they're over 18 and they're consenting to do this, but it still doesn't support the standards, the approved state standards. In what way does it? What is the subject they're learning here? Is this civics? Is this health and sex ed? Privilege? Really? This is not agreed upon. This is not peer-reviewed scientific knowledge. This is not knowledge. These are all opinions formulated in the addled mind of a racist white lady in the 1980s. It's junk, literal junk. So you go to your kids and let them know if they ever get anything based on Peggy McIntosh, this is what it's good for. Line the bottom of a bird cage. That's it. And you should complain loudly. Okay? So straight privilege, white privilege, all of this stuff. And then this is just insane. Here are items from local education authorities, Wake County Public Schools. Image found in CRT-based teacher training. This is teacher training. Naming the slogan for past president as overt white supremacy. Overt white supremacy was, let's see, what was it? Here are things that are considered covert white supremacy. School to prison pipeline. Make America great again. Make America great again. If you deny white privilege, you're a covert racist. Unbelievable. And any of these kinds of things, it's just a joke. But what about me blaming the victim? Tokenism. Tokenism? You mean like, well, we really need to make Captain America be gay now. That literally is tokenism. They're doing it. They get to do it. The people who love these kind of graphics get to do all that kind of stuff. Well, I didn't like this show because there are not enough people there's not enough representation of this particular identity group. You're literally tokenizing people. You realize that. And then we get all the way up to hate crime, swastikas, the N-word, all the kind of stuff, overt white supremacy. This was in teacher training. Whiteness and microaggression. The teachers, public school teachers, had to sit through this. Durham County Racial Equity Task Force. The following are from the Durham County Racial Equity Task Force report. Unless otherwise stated, all text below are directly quoted from the report. We must name that our education system is working as it was designed to indoctrinate all students with the internalized belief that the white race is superior. Really? That's interesting, because my reading of history is that the purpose of the education system initially was to teach all students that the state was God. And that's still going on today. They just moved the deck chairs around on the Titanic and renamed things, but that's still pretty much what it is. Can we name that? Can we name that truth? No, of course not. We have defined whiteness as those often unstated beliefs. So now whiteness is a set of beliefs, behaviors, norms, principles, policies, structures that embody all of our systems and are designed to serve the needs and goals of white people by oppressing people of color. Do you wonder what those are? Do you wonder what whiteness, these unstated beliefs are? Well, you might want to go check out the Smithsonian and their section. They had to remove the infographic, but if you check out the museum on the history of the African American, you can go into their whiteness section and you can read that it's things like the written word, showing up on time, hard work. Yeah, things like that. The nuclear family. Let's see what else. So, of course, Peggy McIntosh is 1988. Peggy McIntosh is mentioned again. Now we get down to, Black Lives Matter in the school's coloring book. Transgender affirming. Look at that. Everybody has the right to choose their own gender by listening to their own heart and mind. Everyone gets to choose if they're a girl or a boy, both or neither, or something else. And no one else gets to choose for them. That includes you, teacher. That includes you. You don't get to choose. You don't get to tell. But that's what you're doing because it's perfectly normal and age appropriate for little kids to, sometimes want to dress like the other gender, sometimes want to think about what it might be like and things like that. And if you rush in to this completely age appropriate kind of questioning that goes on and usually disappears by the age of 10, and if not certainly by puberty, and you say, that's because you are literally telling the child who they are. If you tell a child, well, you're Black, so therefore you're a victim. Oh, well, you're white, therefore you're an oppressor. Oh, well, you're this, therefore you're that. Isn't that the same thing as telling someone who they are? Isn't that choosing for them? Just looking for a little consistency in your theories here. Social media from educators in the state. This is wonderful. Let's see, a Facebook post by a member of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Association of Educators. This flurry of critical race theory laws being passed by old white Republican men around the country is really about shoring up control of political, economic, and social institutions in the face of demographic decline. I'm sorry, who controls the schools? It's not Republicans. No. Who controls the country right now? Yeah, also not Republicans. Who controls the universities? Also not Republicans. Who controls the media? Not Republicans. I could go on, but you get the drift. Facebook post by a teacher from Asheville. Well, that place is like communism, central. When a white teacher can say she doesn't see race when she sends students to discipline, she's exempting herself from being held accountable for her racist behavior. See, if you discipline a Black child, you're automatically racist. It doesn't matter if they deserve it. Nope, they're Black. You discipline them. You must be racist. This is an excellent teaching tool to help students understand white privilege. Update. Adjust the questions for your students. At my school, this could work with a few adjustments. Suggested questions. How many of you, this is the privilege walk. How many of you and or parents have been followed in a store? The usual. It's more Peggy McIntosh. It's let's take the Peggy McIntosh questionnaire. We'll line up the students and we'll run through it and make them publicly in front of their peers, outside, inside in the gym, whatever, answer questions that are deeply personal about themselves and their families. Right. But we care about mental health. We care so much. We care about bullying and mental health in our schools. Oh my God. Often white people get defensive when the subject of white privilege arises as if you're supposed to feel guilty. We don't want your guilt. We need your awareness. The burden of ending racism is not ours alone. Who said it was? Straw man. Nobody said. The burden of ending racism rests within each and every one of us individually. Let's face it. Each of us individually. Yes, that includes Black people. Yes, you can be racist. Yes, you often are racist. Let's see. I just ordered a kid's book about racism. It comes highly recommended. It's a good start turning anti-racist discussions into action in the classroom. If you're looking to purchase the book, this link will give you a $5 code. I'm not affiliated with the company or receiving any benefits, so I just wanted to share with anyone who's interested. I'm also not getting approval from the school to do this, but here you go. And then here's the Assistant Superintendent for Equity Affairs in Wake County, Rodney Trice. Just added the topics critical race theory and 1619 project to my timeline of race and racism in American education. It's amazing how the call for freedom in education echoes through history. Yes, it's amazing. Can't see the picture, but There it is. That was the summary. That's the summary of it. I will put the link to this particular document and the page and so forth in the show notes below in the description box. If you guys are, interested, you can go look at it. I could have, read all kinds of stuff, but I just wanted to give you the highlights. And now you'll have nightmares. I'm sorry. I apologize. But I can't thank the lieutenant governor enough. I don't know if he'll ever see this broadcast. Probably not. My guess is not. But I still want to thank him. I admit, I was skeptical when I first heard they were going to drop the report. I was holding my breath. I was so afraid that they were going to be pressured into saying, well, we found isolated things, but it really wasn't that much. I'm really pleased to see that they are, letting this stuff see the light of day. Things I've known about for years in North Carolina public schools that I tried in vain to escalate, to, shine a light on, that were ignored. And I know I'm not alone. I'm not acting like I'm so heroic. I'm just saying I tried in my own individual way with schools where my kids were attending, and it didn't work. And I'm really glad to see someone taking it seriously. And I'm excited to see what they're going to do next as far as policy. I think there was some discussion at the press conference today. So I encourage you all to check out the North State, I think it's North State Journal, to find out what they're going to do next. I wouldn't look at the News and Observer. I mean, you can, and for the sake of diversity, go look at the News and Observer, but it's going to be very much like, this is all nonsense and not really true. And Charlotte Observer too. Oh, paranoid rich white people. But if you want to go follow AP Dillon, she, look her up. She's going to cover this honestly and tell you what's going to come next. If you live in North Carolina or any of these districts, you're going to want to know. You're going to follow up on what the state's going to do. And as I said, for those of you not in North Carolina, this can be a model. Take this as a model to your lawmakers. Take this to whomever in your legislature would champion this, whoever sits on the Board of Education who might be like-minded, and by the state board. And see if you can get something like this set up to take submissions. Collect it. We know there are organizations doing this, Parents Defending Ed, No Left Turn in Education, Fair for All. There are private organizations all over the country gathering this stuff independently, but you really need your lawmakers and the people who theoretically hold sway over education in your state to take notice of it. And remember, I'm an abolitionist. I'm a government education abolitionist. So I'm not saying this so you can reform the schools. I'm saying this because the sooner you make the lawmakers aware that you're not just paranoid, you're not just a small group, that this stuff is going on all over the place under the radar, the sooner you're going to get things put in place to at least help you and your kid. Like maybe they will pass something to let the dollars follow the kids in the interim. The parents want to leave. They shouldn't be subjected to this. So we can't get it out right away because the wheels move too slowly. Okay, let the dollars follow the kids. There are lots of states right now that are trying to pass that kind of legislation. Work on that. This kind of thing can help you to work towards that, because when they see it in black and white, like there it is, oh my God, it's real, then maybe they'll take it seriously that you might vote against them. When other parents see it's real and you're not just paranoid, then they might come alongside you and fight with you. So this is a worthwhile exercise, even though I don't believe it's going to result in real reform in the classroom. And the reason I say that is, as we've seen, this is teachers. Not all the teachers. Obviously, how many teachers contributed to this? But notice how many were near retirement. Notice how many had 10, 20 years in. The universities, the colleges are teaching this stuff to students and teachers, colleges, teaching programs, and that they're coming out and they're going into the schools, and this is what they're bringing with them. This is what they're bringing with them. So even if you were able to, ban things, pass laws, tell them what has no place in the classroom, without a disciplinary measure and somebody empowered to go and check routinely, how are you going to police this? They know you can't police this. That's why they've been doing it thus far. That's why they've been lying. Oh, it's the curriculum. That's a lie. People have been literally lying to parents and getting away with it for years. They're just discussing. It's not new. This isn't new. Virtual learning helped us see it, but this has been going on for a long time. A long time. BLM has been around since Ferguson, since Barack Obama, whatever. This is not new. But it took this pandemic and virtual learning for parents to actually see it, start complaining about it, etc. So, see if you can get something like this going in your own state, because I think it will be worthwhile. And thank you so much, Emily. Emily says, I researched so much CRT and have tons of documents before I saw you, and no one realizes how deep it goes. How do I explain the severity goals of this ideology, and it's not just historical corrections? Emily, how do you explain it? Goodness, that's what I'm trying to do with this channel. I'm going to have a panel of teachers on next Tuesday night from different subject matter areas, both currently teaching and also sort of at the university research level, to talk about the impact of what's happening to subject matter areas. So if that's what you're talking about, that's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to surface that. I'm trying to make parents aware of what's happening to the child's learning of what they're supposed to learn. Like, if you're spending all this time in the dance class on racial equity, or, looking at Peggy McIntosh with handouts of lists of all these things, when is anything else getting done? When's anything else getting done? When are you learning to read? Mark Robinson at the press conference today, and my friend Lisa, who's in the comments here, from Bright Links, by the way, check us out on Saturday. We're doing a Homeschool 101 little seminar forum thing at noon. So join us. She'll be there. She took some video, and I was going to play it for you, but I'm not sure the sound will come through. But he said in this little video that he was outraged. I mean, you could tell he was so angry, because he said the kids aren't reading. They are not reading. In fact, I think before you go, and I've published this in my locals community, so I would ask that people consider joining that community, because I do publish a lot of the stuff there separately, and not everything makes it to YouTube. I'd have to make, a video every hour. But I do a lot of research, and I'm not sure how many people have seen this actual website. So it's the Nation's Report Card, and it's an eye-opener. Let me pull it up for you, because you'll see right away what he was talking about and why he was so angry that this stuff is taking up our students' time. Let's see, share screen. Hang on a second. Okay, so here we go. See if I can get it in there. This is the Nation's Report Card website. It is literally nationsreportcard.gov. I'll put it in the description box, but this is how you find it. So here we have public and non-public, but I'm just going to go to public for the sake of this conversation. And this is all states, okay? At or above proficient. Now, what you need to know about proficient is what most of us old timers would call sufficient. This just means you've mastered at the grade level what you were supposed to learn to move on and advance to the next grade level. There is another category called advanced beyond that. So proficient just means you're at grade level, where you're supposed to be in that area. There's something called basic that's below this. The numbers go up at basic, but basic means there are some key things missing. You're not proficient at it, but we're going to let you advance anyway, because if we didn't, we'd have like a huge percentage of the population repeating grades. So is it any wonder they keep trying to lower the grading standards? And, like I said, they're moving the deck chairs around, let's change the grading and change the testing. And of course, if we can say it's in the name of equity, it's the name of racial justice. What a nice cover up, right? So take a look at reading. 36% nationwide. Now let's take a look at, so we have the jurisdiction, that's public schools, and select results. And then I think there's a place where we can go if I select reading specifically. Let's see, there's a place to go for the states. Let me see where I can find it at the state level. States, here we go. So since we're talking about North Carolina, let's go check it out. North Carolina's scores. And we're spinning. And reading, we just have grade 8. We don't have the grade 12. Look at reading. 33. This is pretty much standard across the board nationwide. Proficient at reading in 8th grade, 33%. Does that look like literacy to you? Do you think these kids have time to devote to being activists? Does that, yeah, US history is in the teens across the board. All right. See here, looks US history. They're not showing it there. That just means we don't have the score to show you from this time period. But yeah, US history, if we go back up to national, to public schools, because North Carolina didn't have one. But let's take a look. US history, look. Do you think that maybe we have some work to do before we start talking about racial justice, social justice, when the kids can't even pass a proficiency test in the basic facts of history? I mean, I don't know what else I can add. So you might want to check out your state. You might want to check out what's going on with our nation's report card. And then when you think about things like the lieutenant governor's report, or like what you're seeing going on in your own school, or what you're seeing on, the internet coming out of other school districts, you might want to compare it to what they're doing academically, because it's taking up a lot of time from learning anything that is of value. We don't send our kids to taxpayer funded schools where they are conscripted to be. I mean, it's compulsory attendance unless you make other arrangements, right? And you as a parent and a taxpayer, even if you don't have kids in it, have to pay for it. Do you want to pay for your children to be taught to hate their country and hate themselves and possibly hate each other? Do you think that's a worthwhile investment? So when they come to you and say, we need to invest more in education. Well, first of all, they are swimming in cash. So let's not even go there. That's a whole other video. But does that look like a good return on your investment? Even if it were an investment, it's spending. But if it were, usually investments show a return. And if you're losing every year for, decades, that's probably a sign to get out of that investment. And in this case, it's not money alone. You're investing your babies, your children, the future in the literal sense. Is that the return you hope to get? And even if your individual child is getting whatever they can get out of it, even if they're like closing their ears and knuckling down and just like, I'm just going to study facts and get through it and graduate and do what I got to do. Who are their friends? What kind of peer situation do they have? And we now live in a world where peer pressure is good, because you'll be canceled if you don't do what the group wants. And that's approved by the teachers. Look at how many adults were like, I'm afraid to talk. I'm afraid to say anything, but I'm afraid of being canceled. But don't succumb to peer pressure, everybody. We've turned the rules upside down. So even if you think they can somehow get academics out of the situation, what are they getting socially? What about that socialization? What about it? So if you want to learn about your options, get in touch. Like I said, you can join the locals community. Please stop by, especially if you're in North Carolina. Please try to make a point of showing up to the show we've got going on Saturday. That is at noon on this channel. We will have members of HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and also Bright Links and myself. And we'll be talking about homeschooling and all things related to homeschooling. Thank you so much for joining me in this little trip down dystopia lane. I guess that's about it. I hope you all have a great evening.